right, so last week we were able to look into phrasal verbs, all right, which I gave a lot of examples for you to look into. And I went further to also discuss verb phrases. I was able to show a distinction between phrasal verbs and verb phrases in English language. And I promise I'm going to give you some further examples on how to easily identify phrasal verbs different from verb phrases in a sentence structure. So let's see. So here are examples. Examples of phrasal verbs. Examples of phrasal verbs in sentences, okay? Examples of phrasal verbs in sentences. I gave about just 2 last week, and I promised to give you more to enhance your understanding about phrasal verbs. So here, we can name this as number 3 since I gave you 2 the last time. Okay, so the strike was called off by the Senate. Then I have number 4. You can see called off here as it is. That's verb plus ed. That's verb in the past tense form plus what? Off, which is what? Which is the preposition. Remember, that's the preposition. That's prep. So if you combine these two, you will form a phrasal verb. Don't forget, you form a phrasal verb. So the strike was called off by the Senate. All right, as you can see. So number 4, here you have the student stood for each other. The student stood for one another during the heavy protest. So here you have the students stood for one another during the heavy protest. So here, what you have stood for is also verb plus ed plus what? For here is what? That's a preposition. That's prep. So if you combine these together, what would you have? You would have a phrasal verb. So the students, that's the students in total, stood for one another during the heavy protest. So stood for here is the phrasal verb, which could otherwise be replaced by an ordinary verb, okay? I mean by just a single verb. The same way here too, the strike was called off by the Senate. So called off here as well can be replaced by just a single verb, just one verb too as well. Okay, so in the first part, you can replace called off here to be cancelled, okay? Cancelled. You have stood here, meaning to support. Stood for could mean to support in this context. So we can have as many examples as possible when it comes to phrasal verbs in English language. As you can see, I gave about 2 additional examples to make it 4, coupled with the ones given last week, okay? And I believe that's quite understood. We can take as many more. Even from the ones I gave you that I listed out, I gave about 10 to 12. So you can construct sentences from them to see how you can understand phrasal verbs better in terms of the usage in sentence. So the strike was called off by the Senate. The students stood for one another during the heavy protest. Okay, so you have a full stop to that. And look at the analysis here. You have called off, which is called. That's a verb in the past tense form. Plus what? Off. What's off here? That's a preposition. Now, when you combine the verb in the past tense form plus a preposition, you form a phrasal verb. The same way too, here you have the students stood for one another during the protest. So stood for is a verb in the past tense form plus for, which is a preposition. And if you combine both, you would actually form what? A phrasal verb. I hope that is understood to you now. So additional examples would help to enhance your understanding about usages of phrasal verbs in English language. And then let me equally give about 2 examples to support the verb phrase that I taught. If you remember verb phrases very, very well, I said that it's a combination of 2 or more verbs in a sentence structure. And 2 or more verbs here can be a main verb with auxiliary verb. And we went further last week to look at how main verbs are constructed, functions of the main verbs. And we're also able to look at auxiliary verbs and their different functions. I hope this is understood to you. Okay, so now we have, these are exercises or drill. We can call it a drill or an exercise. So here you have, instruction is to identify the verb phrase in the sentences below. So identify the verb phrase in the sentences below. So here let's have, okay, I gave about 2. So let's continue with number 3. So here you have she was standing beside the gate for he was being called to present the proposal. Then the 5th one was being called to present the proposal. Then the 5th one we have he has been assigned the responsibility All right, so we have about 5 here. So the first one is, she was standing beside the gate. That's a full stop. Then the next is, she was being called to present the proposal. The 5th is, he has been assigned the responsibility. Now we're trying to identify the verb phrases in each of this particular sentence. I gave about 2 in the previous class. Now I want to make it up to 5. That's why I gave additional 3. Then regarding the phrasal verb, I gave about 2 or 3. All right. Then here I'm giving 2 more to make it 5. Now she was standing beside the gate. Was standing is the verb phrase, because verb phrases would have to do with a combination of 2 or more verb structures. That is, you combine about 2 or more verbs to form a verb phrase. And examples of these verbs can be a main verb and an auxiliary verb. Do you understand? All right. By auxiliary verb, it could be primary auxiliary verb. It could be modal auxiliary verb that we could form. Now, words here is verb plus ed, that's verb in the past, plus what? Stand, that's the main verb, plus ing. Can you see? which shows continuous. Now, if I combine these three, what I will form here is verb phrase. That's VP. All right, I'll form a verb phrase here. The next one, which is number 4, what's the verb? Was being called. Okay, was being called. So this is verb plus ed. That's in the past tense form. Then here, that's auxiliary. This is an auxiliary verb. Being is an auxiliary verb. This is also an auxiliary too. Plus called, that's main verb plus ed. Can you see that now? So if I combine this together, I'll form a verb phrase. Okay, that's VP, that's verb phrase. Then he has been assigned the responsibility. Okay, has been assigned is the collection of the verb phrase. So has is what? That's auxiliary plus auxiliary as well, plus assigned, that's the main verb, plus what? Ed, that's the past tense form. So that's the past tense form. So if you join all this together, you will form a verb phrase. You will definitely form a verb phrase. You definitely form a verb phrase. Now, class, I hope you can see from the board. Let me know. You can unmute yourself to speak, please. I hope you can see from the board. All right, so let's move to what we have for today. Okay, since you can see from the board, that's good. Let's move to what we have for today. We're going to be looking at adjectives. Let's consider adjectives. Now, what is an adjective? All right, so an adjective is a word which describes, okay? By describing, it tells you how something is. That's the name describe. If you don't want to use the word describe, you can as well use qualifies. And by qualifying simply means in the same way, it helps to present or to tell you how something is. That's the major function of an adjective. And remember, adjective tends to precede nouns in a sentence structure. That is, adjective tends to come before nouns. Majorly, adjective will tell you how a noun is, how a noun looks like in terms of the structure or in terms of the meaning. So that's the major function of an adjective. And remember that an adjective performs the same function as an adjectival phrase and also as an adjectival clause, which means that the same function that an adjective performs as a word class, which is as a part of speech, it is also the same function that it performs at the level of a phrase, even at the level of a clause. For instance, just like I told you that an adjective qualifies or describes a noun or a pronoun in a sentence, it does the same thing too at the level of a phrase and even at the level of a clause too. That means at the level of a phrase, which is adjectival phrase, an adjective would also qualify a noun or a pronoun. At the level of a clause as well, an adjective will equally qualify a noun or a pronoun. I hope this is understood. However, I will illustrate everything on the board for you to have a comprehensive note. I hope this is clear now. So here we have an adjective is a word. An adjective is a word which qualifies or describes a noun or a pronoun in a sentence. So what does that tell you? That's to indicate the fact that adjective focuses more on nouns and pronouns. It has less to do with verbs and adverbs. Okay? The major function of an adjective is to qualify or to describe either a noun or a pronoun. I hope that is clear to you now. So in this case, the key word to take note is qualifies, describes, all right? And then what is it describing in entirety? It describes a noun or it describes a pronoun in a particular sentence. I hope this is clear to you. Okay, so let's continue. The function of an adjective, as a part of speech, yes, please. Blurry. Wow. But this is not blurry. I don't know. All right, please, is there any other students having the same issue? I mean, trying to see whether the board is blurry. I'm even writing as bolding as possible. It is before. Okay, but it is better now. So I think it's only for, I don't know who complained earlier. It might be from your camera or your coverage. Maybe it's network, I guess. Yeah, because since it's not a general issue for everyone, I guess it might be maybe from your end. All right, let me take that again from here, maybe due to slight distraction. Now, I'm practically looking at how we'll be able to have a comprehensive understanding of adjective. The reason I'm teaching all these word classes so that when I will get to the level of phrases and clauses and the rest of them, you will not have any issue at all right? That's why you need to listen and pay attention very, very well. Now, I'm talking about adjectives, and I said that an adjective is a word, okay, which qualifies or describes either a noun or a pronoun. And the major function that an adjective performs is to qualify. And I explained to you by the word qualify means that what? It tells you what a noun or a pronoun is, or what condition a noun or a pronoun is. Okay, so now I mentioned that the function of an adjective as a part of speech, all right, is equally the same function of an adjective at the level of a phrase and also at the level of a clause, which means that the function that an adjective performs as a part of speech is also the same function that an adjectival phrase performs and also an adjectival clause performs too. So there's no difference basically. So if you understand adjectives at the level of part of speech, you will equally understand it at the level of a phrase and also at the level of a clause. So here you have the function of an adjective as a part of speech is equally the function of an adjectival phrase. Don't forget, if you don't want to call it an adjectival phrase, you can as well call it an adjective phrase. It's still the same thing. So it's equally the same, it's equally the function of an adjectival phrase and an adjectival clause. Adjectival clause. Okay, please don't forget. Now I'll need to take this off. All right, class. I hope the network is favorable now. Can you see the board clearly? I hope you can hear me very well. All right, okay, that's fine. That's beautiful. So perfect. Yes, perfect. Let's continue, class. So now this is still the basic introductory aspect of the adjective, okay? So now let's continue. So from this end, you have an adjective will mostly precede will mostly precede a noun or a pronoun. Okay? An adjective will mostly precede a noun or a pronoun. But remember, some adjectives function as noun. Some adjectives function as nouns. So what does that mean? It means that there's certain adjectives that you would see, you might mistaking them for nouns, okay? And remember that adjective would always precede. By preceding, I mean it will occur before. It will come before the noun in order to describe it. Or it will come before the pronoun in order to describe it. I hope this is clear to you now. So that's the positioning. That's the structural understanding of an adjective. In terms of the structure, an adjective will come before the noun to describe it. The reason adjective is occurring before the noun is to tell you what condition, what situation, how the noun is or the noun looks like. So now let's continue. Types of adjectives. Okay, type of adjectives. Now, I'm going to be explaining about two basic types of adjective, though we have other ones. But I'm going to be explaining two basic types, okay? The first one is called the attributive. Attributive adjective. Attributive adjective. And what's that? It is an adjective. It is an adjective which mostly occur before the noun in a sentence. So this type of adjective usually precedes the noun in a sentence. It comes before the noun in a sentence. So it is called attributive. That is, it is an adjective that usually occurs before the noun. So it precedes the noun in a sentence structure. Okay? So any adjective that comes before the noun is called an attributive adjective. I want you to understand this very, very well. An adjective that occurs before a noun is called an attributive adjective. Okay? So let's take an example. So we have examples in sentences. Examples in sentences. So here you have number one. And remember, you can have more than one adjective occurring before a noun. So in that case, you have about two attributive adjectives. Okay? Now, you have the smart young boy, for instance, full stop. So let's do the analysis. Here, you have, this is a determiner. Smart is an adjective. What type of adjective? Attributive. The smart young boy. Then, young is also what? That's also an adjective. So if you combine these together, you form what? You form attributive adjective. Attributive adjective. You form attributive adjective. This is the actual noun here. That is the noun. So THE is an article, all right? But the encompassing class, the holistic class is called a determiner, all right? But specifically is an article. Here we have smart, that's an adjective, and we have young, that's also another adjective. So if I combine these two adjectives together, I would form what is known as an attributive adjective. Why do I classify these two as an attributive adjective? The reason is these two, all right, occur before